Susie,
Rob,
have you ever thought about why T-Rex's arms are so small?
uh, I mean, lots of people have thought about that a lot of times, right? Or at least they've talked about it a lot. Do you know, someone's come up with the idea that maybe they were sexual ticklers.
Ticklers?
Sexual ticklers. I know. I don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't know why. It's very strange, but this is just
Am
exactly the
I,
sort of thing that theropod people do. I bet they're all men.
am I showing my naivety here of not knowing what a tickler is in this context?
No, I don't think so. I don't know what it is either. I mean, like, yeah, as I say, it's just a thing that a man came up with because obviously it's got to be something to do with sex and it's got to be a man because it's about theropods.
Right, but that's not what we're going to investigate today, right? Or is it? I have
Well,
to
we
wait and find out.
are we are going to investigate small arms in theropods, so we are going to be addressing this. But happily, the sexual ticklers hypothesis does not come up.
Okay.
So I've got a paper for you today that I decided to do, even though it's on theropods, and as everybody knows how much I enjoy a theropod, and particularly a tyrannosaur. But I decided to do this one because it's got quite a lot of press, hasn't it? And it's got, in fact,
Hmm.
this paper has been everywhere. I've been seeing headlines about this paper all over the place online, and so I wanted to do it because I thought, I really should read it, and this is a good excuse, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and also it is something that people love to speculate. Undergraduates ask me this question all the time. Non-paleontologists, when they ask me about paleontology, ask me about this question. It's something that people are interested in. Even, why did T-Rex and other theropods get small arms, right? That's a question of legitimate interest, I guess.
I think it's probably the
Your
fourth.
face is looking a bit more skeptical.
No, I think I'm agreeing with you actually. I think it's probably the fourth most asked question that I get. Behind, I like to have lists of these things, like what rankings of bones, what my favourite bones, that
Uh-huh.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So my fourth, so I think the question that people ask me most is, how do you become a paleontologist?
Yes.
Um,
Oh, listen to our special episode on that coming up. Yeah,
there
but
you
go
go.
ahead.
That's why we're doing it.
Yeah,
My question, probably a second one, is how did Stegosaurus mate? To which
of
obviously
course.
the answer is carefully. We all know that.
Hmm.
What's the third one? Maybe it's the third most asked question. Why? Oh no, who would win in a fight between Stegosaurus and
Right.
Allosaurus?
Yeah.
Obviously. And then after that, why did T-Rex have tiny arms? I reckon they're the top four questions that dino
I
nerds ask.
often get asked by my son's schoolmates, "What's the biggest fossil you found?" I'm like, well, I actually don't know. I'm not really interested in whether they're big or not. But as far as if you're an 8-year-old boy, that's the big question.
Size matters, Rob. Size matters.
So, well, as we're going to find out in this paper today, size matters, I guess. So, do you want to tell us what the paper is?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's stop messing about. Come on, be serious. Be serious. Right. The paper is called Drivers and Mechanisms of Convergent Fall-in Reduction in Non-Avian Theropods, or Theropod Dinosaurs. And it was published in Proceedings of the Royal Society B, which is a very prestigious journal, just a couple of weeks ago, wasn't it? So we
Yep.
are now today at the beginning of June. So it was probably just published on early June. I couldn't actually find a date on the paper, but there we go. And the authors are Charlie Shearer, Lizzie Steele, and Paul Upchurch from UCL and Cambridge. And this paper formed part of Charlie's master's thesis. So that's nice.
Oh,
So
blimey, that's
yeah, well
nice.
done,
It's a
Charlie.
master's thesis. It's not. That's unusual to get your whole master's thesis published on this scale. Well done, him.
Yeah, and in Proc B as well. Well done, Charlie.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, this paper for me, I found is a combination of things that I really like and things that I
Hmm.
don't like. So it's quite an interesting one because I was going through it and going, yay, ooh, yay, ooh. So
Yeah.
it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
I'm quite, I think this is quite a good one to address. So I'm quite happy that I
Good.
chose this
I'm
paper.
just checking the dates. It came out on May the 20th. So it was about
Oh,
two
okay.
weeks ago. We are hot off the presses here. This is hot new content coming at you for the fossil files.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the top thing that I didn't like about this paper was that it is on theropods. But that's not Charlie's fault.
Well, people love theropods, even if you don't. Now,
People love theropods.
you've said about 3 times in the last 5 minutes that you hate theropods, which I'm finding a bit tricky because I need you to be my theropod whisperer here because I've had to read this and I've now had to figure out what the difference between abelos. Okay, so right, fossil files listeners out there, some of them are going to know about dinosaurs, and I'm going to embarrass myself by mispronouncing them and not knowing what the difference between a abelosaurid and a ceratosaurid and a megalosaurid is. So I need you to guide my hand through this here.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Rob, they're all the same. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Well, that was very much not the point of this paper. The point.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well,
Okay.
anyway, no, actually, I mean, I don't really have anything against theropods, but I just have this whole like shtick on social
Uh-huh.
media about, having a thing about not liking theropods. I don't care really. It's fine. They're fine.
Okay.
They're fine. I don't really hate them. Anyway, let's get on with paper. So, for those of you that don't know, and when I say those of you that don't know, I mean literally no one, what a theropod is. Theropods are the meat-eating dinosaurs. People seem to like them, as Rob said. And they are, whilst I pretend that they're boring, it's fair to say that they did actually occupy kind of predatory niches inland ecosystems for about 200 million years, throughout the Mesozoic. They were pretty, dominant throughout the
Hmm.
Mesozoic, and they are, of course, represented today by the birds, which are the most speciose terrestrial vertebrates. So theropods done pretty well, I think we can say.
I think those two things kind of blow any perspective that we might have about dismissing theropods. They gave
Yeah,
rise to birds. Come on,
yeah, okay.
and some of the biggest, most fossils that have attracted the most attention, like T Rex and others.
Yeah, all right, they're okay,
Okay.
fine. As everybody will be, I think everyone can probably picture what T-Rex looks like, but all theropods were two-legged, as far as we know. Well, maybe except for Spinosaurus, but I think that the jury's still out on that a little bit.
I
Um,
think that's a whole separate series of episodes about
a whole
Spinosaurus if
separate
we want
series.
to submit ourselves to that.
I don't think we do, Rob. I don't think we do.
Well, if a new paper on Spinosaurus comes out, which seems to happen every like 3 months, we may force ourselves to do so.
Yeah, I'll do a Spinosaurus paper. Anyway, so theropods, two-legged generally, forelimbs modified for grasping, at least basally. But of course, through their evolution, several clades underwent forelimb reduction. So several clades, for some clades, well, particularly the Penoraptoran theropods, they actually turned into birds. So they evolved into birds. So they actually had kind of elongate forelimbs, but in
Hmm.
many clades, or in several clades, they actually reduce their forelimbs and they have these tiny, tiny little arms. Most famously in T-Rex, right? T-Rex has these
Yeah.
tiny arms, and there's all these kind of jokes that you can, and T-shirts that you can buy about how did T-Rex do push-ups and that kind of thing, because it had these tiny arms. But actually, T-Rex wasn't the only theropod to reduce its arms, and there
Hmm.
were a number of others, as you said early. The Abelisaurids, they also reduced their arms, which are another group best known from the Southern Hemisphere, perhaps only
Hmm.
known from the Southern Hemisphere. I do my best not to really pay much attention to theropods, so I don't know that much about them, but we can find out more. Anyway, they appear to have reduced these different groups that have reduced their forelimbs. There's kind of been arguments about why, and they appear to have done it differently in each group. So, in some they will have reduced the hand, in others they will have reduced, the ulnar and radius, the lower part of the arm, in others they will
Hmm.
have reduced the upper part of the arm. So it's not the same mechanism that is, they're not doing it in the same way in every
Yeah.
clade. So they're doing it convergently.
Can I just interject one moment? When you keep saying forelimbs, you don't mean the number four limbs. We're talking about the forelimbs as in at the front, FORE, the front limbs. Just if
Indeed.
anyone was listening thinking they're reducing their four limbs, no, the front,
No, no,
the
no. Yeah, the
arms.
front limbs,
We're
the
talking
front
about the
limbs,
arms.
the
They've got
arms. We're talking
massive
about the
chunky
arms.
legs. Yeah.
Exactly. We're talking about the arms. Now, of course, as you can imagine, there has been a whole ton of speculation around why this happened. And this kind of has ranged from, at least within T-Rex, people have suggested
Mhm.
actually that there was a functional reason. So this is, it's not just that the limbs became vestigial. So they're not just they didn't just reduce because they weren't really being used. So they just kind of got,
Hmm.
reduced them. That they actually did have a function. And some people have argued that there were clearly muscle attachments on them and they still had a function. Whereas others have argued quite strongly that they're clearly vestigial. Um, but I think what one of the things I like about this paper is rather than just doing a load of rampant speculation without any data, they actually take a data-driven approach and they actually,
Hmm.
look at this in a statistical way with some actual data. And they use both kind of qualitative and quantitative methods to address this. And I think that's a really nice aspect of this study and is really what the kind of novel contribution to this argument that they're bringing. Instead of just a bunch of dinosaur geeks arguing online about what a feeling in their water, this is actually bringing some science to this question. So I think,
Yeah,
well done
that
team.
came across. Yeah, that came across to me too, right? This has been too reliant on a lot of anecdotes
Yeah,
of like,
absolutely.
here's what I think is happening, and here's what I observed in one taxon, and here's what I observed in another taxon, and comparisons between taxa were based on completely different things. So that was also what I thought here. They've taken a really big approach, doing things in a sort of robust way. Well, robust.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the robustness of robustness in a minute, I guess.
I mean, so a thing about the study, it's not really hypothesis driven. There's not
No,
really a hypothesis or a question behind it. They're
no.
just like fall in reduction in theropods. That's interesting. Let's use a battery of statistical techniques to address it. So let's get into actually what they did and how they did it. So they made a big super tree. So a super tree is like kind of getting together a load of published phylogenies, published family trees of theropod dinosaurs, and sort of putting them all together manually. So you get a kind of representation of what a consensus view of the literature is on the relationships between the dinosaurs. And then they use this as a basis to do a whole load of phylogenetic comparative statistics and other statistics as well, non-phylogenetic ones too. They used a metric called SFR, which is the skull to forelimb ratio. And they use this to define what they mean by reduced forelimbs and vestigial forelimbs are. So they talk about reduction of forelimbs and vestigial forelimbs. And they define it in this study as reduced limbs are those in which the forelimb is shorter than the skull. And vestigial limbs are one in which the skull is at least 1.2 times the length of the forelimb. So obviously, if you are a dinosaur with an extremely elongate snout, that's going to be, forelimb reduction is only ever relative to skull length. But happily, most theropods don't do that. There's some exceptions like Spinosaurids, but generally theropods, their skulls don't change that much in shape, so it's probably fine. And a thing I do like about this as well is that they tried varying these boundaries. So of course this is kind of just a random, the ratio between skull and forelimb length is a continuous characteristic, isn't it? There's not a
Hmm.
clear line.
Hmm.
So what they said was, okay, well, what happens if we change the boundaries of this ratio so that our definition of reduced changes relative to skull length? So what happens if a reduced forelimb is like 0.9, that ratio is 0.9 instead of 1? How does that affect our results? So they did some sensitivity analyses, and I love a sensitivity analysis, so that's really, really good. I think, yeah, well, we'll talk more about error bars. I'm going to go on another rant about error bars at some point here. You realize this, but this is a good thing here. And then they come up with another metric, which a new metric, which quantifies cranial robusticity. So that's like how chunky your skull is. And they call this CRS. Now, this is one aspect of the paper that I don't enjoy, Rob. Too many acronyms does my nut in.
Oh, don't! When I read that, I was like, don't do this, don't do that.
Don't do the
Well, okay,
acronyms.
I
Don't do the
understand why,
acronyms.
right? If you're a scientist and you created your own little metric in your own little lab group, having a way to talk about it without saying it out loud is essential, right? But if I read a paper with too many three-letter acronyms in it, I'm going to tear my hair out. It makes it more difficult to read. Just use the English language. If I want to be able to understand what it is, walk me through it. Hold my hand. Make my life easy. This is what I'm going to say to everybody. And also, actually, the worst for this isn't scientists. The worst for this is if I go to an admin meeting. Oh God! If I go to a meeting organised by the dean or well, I shouldn't go pointing fingers specifically. Let's say there's some
Some
no,
senior
I'm overjumping.
admin people at the university who will
Some
remain
CC
nameless.
admin people, or a museum, or a corporate entity, and that our CRMs are down to the 3.2% based on our XRTs, and I'm just pulling my hair out. Going, what the hell are you talking about? So at one point, my job was to sort of chair one of the staff meetings. That was my sort of admin job I was given, and I sort of introduced this system where I would like punish anybody that introduced a load of three-letter acronyms that provided them, and it became a sort of joke. And some people were like, "Oh, Rob will tell me off." I'm like, "No, I'm deadly serious. You're making life more difficult. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it now." Anyway,
I'm
the more
really,
important point
really
is,
glad that you said all that, Rob, because it means that you went on the rant and not me. But exactly 100% that. And the thing is here that the metric is called cranial robusticity, whereas the acronym is CRS. And actually, you're only saving one word. It's not like,
yeah,
there's, because Proc B, I mean, sometimes in these papers, if you've got like something that's got like six words,
hmm,
and you've got a word limit of 5,000 words to write your paper or something, reducing a
hmm,
6 word thing that you say over and over and over again
hmm,
down to one word can really save you time, right? Can save you space in your paper. But here it doesn't save any space.
I have to defend these authors now. I went on that long rant. It wasn't about this paper. These people have done it. They've created two metrics, and one of them was necessary because they need to define this robusticity, which is an interesting point. But also, loads of people are guilty of this. This isn't based on my rant about these guys here. I feel bad now, especially if you highlight that this is a master's project, and I'm now going off on a rant. Apologies. Right, they've used an acronym for robusticity to try and quantify how robust a skull is, which is important because what does robust mean? If you look at a T-Rex skull, you go, well, that looks really chunky and robust. But how do you actually measure that? Okay, oh, yeah, look, it looks really, really, well, it's got these big solid bits and it's strong. Okay, but out of a percent, out of a number, how do I give that a number?
So this is an excellent point, and absolutely, I'm not absolutely not dissing the statistic at all. Just simply the use of acronyms. I just found it confusing as I was reading the paper. Charlie, if you're listening, love your paper, don't love your acronyms. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, cranial robusticity. Yes, and this is what the point you just made, Rob, was a great point because this is exactly the kind of thing that people say, oh, well, that one looks a bit more robust or that one is a bit more robust, but there's actually it's really poorly defined, right? And so they actually go to the effort of making this new metric, which is actually a quantitative way of measuring cranial robusticity, and it includes various different parameters that you basically quantify and then kind of add them all up. And they go into much more detail in the supplementary data about this. But I'm going to skip a bit. I'm going to skip the supplement.
Skip it, yeah.
But basically, it's a combination of the shape of the skull, tooth morphology, some bite force estimates, and skull fusion.
But before we move on, I think we need to congratulate them again for this because too often, especially paleontologists, are horribly guilty of this. If I go to a talk at SVP and I see people talking about robustness, or this particular clade is very diverse, or this particular clade is very unique, or this one is like, there's so many, loose definitions about what's going on, about what people think, and if you don't actually measure it, it's pointless. You need to actually have these sorts of describing, and I think that's really difficult when you get onto these anecdotal stories because you say, oh, well, okay, this has got robust, therefore it's related to this. Well, what do you mean by robust? How are we measuring that?
Exactly.
So we need to quantify it. Let's get some numbers. Lovely.
The other thing that I think that means that this paper will do very well, actually, because what they've done is they've made a new metric. And whenever you make a new metric, then you get loads of citations, right? So they'll be like, everybody will be like, oh, this cranium is very robust since Sushura et al. 2026. And that's it. Charlie's made it for life now because,
hang on. I was just wondering, is it going to get named the new metric going to be named after him?
The Shura index.
Indeed, but look at his acronyms. Currently the acronym is CRS, cranial robustness something.
Gore.
And his name is Charlie Roger Shearer. So I don't know if this is some weird design or has he intentionally given his own initials to this acronym.
That's really funny.
That's got to be a coincidence. The Charlie Roger Shearer index or the cranial robustness score, same thing.
Love it. Brilliant. Okay, so what did they do? Let's crash on. So what they did then was they tested for relationships between this skull to forelimb length ratio, which is a way of quantifying forelimb reduction, and several characteristics, including body size, body mass, skull size, and this cranial robusticity score that they've come up with. So let's chat about the results. So they looked at Spearman's. They did Spearman's rank correlations and linear regressions, and they found significant positive relationships between the skull forelimb length ratio and cranial robusticity, body mass, and skull size. So all of these things, body mass, skull size, and cranial robusticity, are all linked to reduction of forelimbs. Body mass shows the weakest relationship. And so what they did was they also normalized for body mass. So they just took body mass out of the equation. And then they found even stronger positive relationships between this kind of reduction in forelimbs and cranial robusticity and skull size. They also did the same, but they corrected for phylogeny. So this is something, so they used phylogenetic least squares regression. So this is something that you need to do, right? Because if you, a lot of the statistics that we use and things like just a linear regression where you just kind of plot, an XY graph, you plot one variable along the x-axis and one variable along the y-axis, and you just plot the data up. It assumes that all of those data points are independent. And when we have taxa that are related to each other, they evolved from each other, then some of the relationship between the two variables might be because they're closely related. So we have a whole suite of statistics that we use to take into account the fact that these things are closely related to each other and the data points are non-independent. And so phylogenetic least squares regressions is a way of carrying out a regression, but taking into account that fact that these animals are all related to each other. They took into account phylogeny effectively, and they still found that there were significant correlations between these factors, although a little bit weaker, but that's what we'd expect.
Which I'm glad they did, because when I saw their first analysis that they didn't do that, I got a bit nervous. But then I was like, keep reading. They've gone and done it.
Okay, they've done it. And actually, they show the results of this, and we're going to talk about that in a sec. They also then used this best fit model. They looked at what model best fit the data to describe this skull falling ratio. And the best fit model includes both cranial robusticity and body mass. So both of those factors are impacting that kind of fall-in reduction. This is shown on figure 1. Okay, now Rob, have you got the paper open in front of you, by the way?
I do.
Okay, figure 1. Let's have a look at it. What do you think is going to be my rant about figure 1 here? Given that we've done a lot of papers together now.
Oh, acronyms?
Nope.
No error bars?
Okay, so we're going to come to error bars. There are error bars. We are going to come to error though. It's how far you have to zoom in to see the text. Why is this figure produced at such a small size? For God's sake.
Okay, I've zoomed in quite a lot, but is it because... Well, I do want to remind the listeners that shortly before we started recording, Susie said, I've got to go and get my glasses, otherwise we won't be able to see. Is it because you're being a bit of a grandma and you have to get your glasses on to zoom in here?
No, I actually think this might be something to do with the journal, though. Why have the journal produced these two graphs at such a tiny size?
Yeah,
it's
that's
tiny.
It's mysterious.
They're tiny. But anyway, it's really annoying because the text size on this figure, I mean, if the text size in the paper is, say, 10-point font or even 12-point font, on this figure the text size cannot be larger than about 4 points. It's just too small to read. People, please, do you know what I want to do is, can I do a whole podcast on just how to make figures, Rob? That's really boring, isn't it? I just really want to do it though, because it's really, really annoying.
I have a whole tutorial and lesson on this in the bank that I used to deliver to the training for our students about how to prepare figures for scientific publication. Maybe you and I should trade notes on this.
Maybe we should. Anyway. Okay, so that's my first little rant there, but I think that's probably the journal's fault. Okay, so I have a couple of questions and thoughts on this particular relationship that they've identified. So the first thing is body mass. Now, body mass is one of my favorite rants. In fact, I've got a whole talk based on how we establish body mass in extinct animals. And of course, establishing body mass in extinct animals is quite a difficult thing to do, particularly in a group of animals for which we don't really, we have no living analog or no close living relatives with similar body proportions today, right? So yeah, there's nothing really like a theropod that's out there today. Now, there are a variety of different methods to do it, but the one that is applied in this paper, and it is the one that is most widely applied, is a method whereby you measure, so for a biped, you measure the femoral circumference. And you can, and what we know about extant bipeds is that when you measure their femoral circumferences, there is it doesn't matter what clade they are, it doesn't matter who they are, how they're related, you get quite there is a relationship between femoral circumference and body mass.
Hang on. I didn't realise they did that. This is already sending alarm bells ringing. Okay, keep going.
So this is a method. I mean, it's been around for a long time. They did it with quadrupedal taxa. It's better constrained for quadrupedal taxa because there what you do is you measure the humerus circumference and you add it to the you log it, and then you measure the femur circumference and then you log it, and then you add them together, and then you can back out body mass. Now, this is a method that has been around for a long time, but has most recently been kind of articulated, and there's an R package that was written by Nick Campione. Nick Campione and David Evans wrote a paper on this. I'm going to say it's like 2011, is that sort of time period, and they really kind of sort of reintroduced this method to the forefront of paleo and to dinosaur research. And Nick wrote an R package called Mastimate, which is very, very easy to use to actually calculate body mass. The body masses that are derived in this paper, they used the supplementary data from a paper that Roger Benson published in 2014, which has a load of dinosaur body masses in it that was derived from using Campione and Evans's method. Now, the thing with Campione and Evans's method, and any body mass estimation indeed, is that there are very large error bars. And the error bars around body mass estimation for bipeds are larger than they are for quadrupeds. So when I say very large error bars, I'm just going to give you an example. I use this method to calculate the body mass of Sophie, the Stegosaurus, which is our Stegosaurus in the museum. This is obviously the quadrupedal one, which is better constrained and has smaller error bars than that for the bipeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
The body mass of Sophie ranges using that method from anywhere between 1.5 and 4 tons. Okay, now that's
Whoa.
it's quite big. It's quite a big error bar, isn't it? That then.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, we think of the ecology of organisms that are 1.5 tons and organisms that are 4 tons. That's, I mean, is huge. Okay, so what my concerns here were raised because somewhere in the paper, and I won't be able to find it at this instant, the body mass of T-Rex is cited. Okay, I've found one here. It says Ceratosaurus is not classified as a gigantic theropod, although mass estimates 966 kilograms place it very close to the 1,000 kilogram threshold for gigantism. So that mass estimate is 9. So it's given to the nearest kilogram, and there are no error bars on that mass estimate. Okay, so I have concerns that when that body mass is not being, the error bars around body mass are not being accurately reflected. And this is something that is a massive problem, and that people are not doing a lot in many papers. They just cite this animal weighs 8,942 kilos. It doesn't, and that's only one individual as well. Like, that's not a population.
And a few grams.
Yeah, I mean, I body mass needs to, and the other, we've talked about compounding errors upon errors upon errors in the giant octopus paper, right? And this is a concern for me here, that body mass is overly precisely quoted in this paper, and is not, that the body mass isn't being accurately, the errors around body mass, the uncertainty around body mass of these animals aren't being accurately taken into account.
Can I go on a slight perspective here? I don't know if this is what you were about to say, but that, I guess that worries me a little bit, with the over precision, especially with the 990, whatever it was. But if the same technique is being used consistently, then maybe the error bars will be consistent across the piece, and therefore it might be okay. What worries me more is if you're using the femur. Is this what you were about to talk about?
Go on. No,
if you're using the femur as your basis for the body mass estimates, how thick is your femur, and we'll estimate the bed on that one metric. Maybe that makes sense if you're comparing stegosaurs and iguanodon or whatever. But if you're looking specifically at the question of forelimb reduction and the move to being more bipedal and having shorter forelimbs, then at the same time, I might naturally expect your femur to get longer as you more robust or wider. So under those circumstances, as we move to increasingly bipedal and bigger femurs, stronger femurs, because you're putting more of your weight onto your rear legs and none on your forelegs, we might actually be ending up looking at a factor that's correlated. Sense that
yes, absolutely, Rob. But that is also why the error bars are quoting the error bars are really important, because Campioni and Evans's method, that is based on extant data. So that error bar that we see is based on extant animals, and extant bipeds are basically what humans, kangaroos, and birds, which have different ways of walking, but nonetheless we still do derive a straight line relationship between the log of the femoral circumference and the log of body mass. However, that straight line relationship has some big error bars around it. So if you quoted the error bars, then that issue around different animals with different postures maybe having different robusticities could be taken into account. The other thing that it might take into account is ontogeny. So one thing we also know is that dinosaurs didn't have determinate growth. So they didn't stop growing. They continued to grow throughout their lives. However, we do see a massive slowdown in growth. And what tends to happen is things just become more chunky as things get older. And for many of these taxa, we're not going to know whether they're adults, whether they had reached that size where they're just getting chunky, whether we're seeing the biggest in the clade. We simply don't have the sample size to know. So I think representing error is really important.
I wrote that down in my notes I must ask Susie about ontogeny, because I'm worried about the body size of these things. I mean, what we'd really, in an ideal world, we'd have a nice ontogenetic sequence of growth, for all of these, and we could look at them and reconstruct how it's going. But we won't have that because
No.
the fossil record is shit. So, well, no, it's not shit, but it's tricky.
It's shit enough that we won't have that. Yeah.
But for this question about allometry and growth and body sizes, that's really important. But I mean, they're working within the parameters of what's available, so surely we should forgive them for that, shouldn't we?
Absolutely. And we always talk about how, with the fossil record, we either don't do anything at all, or we do what we can with the data that we have. And yes, we don't have a population. But so if we had it, so this goes back to my error bars, quoting your error bars, particularly around that body mass. Some of this uncertainty will be taken into account by that large error bar, which is not addressed here. And the other thing is, just take a look at the R-squared values on those graphs.
Okay. I mean, it's hard to know how much statistical depth should we go into. We need to have a chat with our fossil files listeners. Do we want more stats or less stats? Well, I'm going to look at the graphs. R-squared, here we go. So this is a way of measuring how much the strength of the relationship in your graph is. If I've got an x-axis and a y-axis and I ask, oh dear. So it's quite weak. Okay, so
so
basically,
Rob's just seen the answer.
Okay, so the answer is that whilst they are statistically significantly correlated, right,
based on their p-values,
there actually is an awful lot of noise in this. Is the point, right? The R-squared is very low, which means that they're not very tightly correlated. There's quite a lot of noise in this, but that's biological data. Come on, biological data is always noisy.
Rob, the R-squareds are less than 0.3, which isn't. Like the anthropologists get all het up about p-values, don't they? And p-values tell you whether or not a relationship is significant or not. And there's lots of kind of journals, particularly hardcore statistics journals, that actually won't allow p-values to be quoted, because I'm not a statistician, and you can tell me off about if I get all this wrong. But there's a whole load of other things other than correlations that p-values, that can generate a statistically significant p-value. I think it's fair to say that the correlations that they show here are extremely weak. Statistically significant, yet they are extremely weak.
But I was about to say, you can argue that they've done it in lots of different ways, and therefore they've done lots of different tools here. Mm-hmm. They've looked at the raw correlation. They have. Okay. They looked at the ratios. They looked at the absolute values. They've looked at the ontogenies where they can. They've detracted for the phylogenetic signal, which I think was absolutely essential.
Oh yeah, well, absolutely.
Anyway, I think those are interesting questions, but I don't think we can point them directly at this author and this paper. I think this is a broader question that we need to grapple with as a people that study fossil morphology.
Yeah, I think there's look, we're talking about this paper today. I know all of the authors, right? So I'm not, and I'm working with one of them right now. I should probably have put that as a disclaimer at the beginning.
Oh yeah, anyway, come on. We need to conflict of interest
here. Sorry, Lizzie. I'm working with Lizzie Steele at the moment. We're co-supervising a master's student. Anyway, but that is undeniably a weak correlation. Anyway, let's move on from these regressions. So other results that they found, skull fall-in ratio has a strong phylogenetic signal, as you say, which means it's not varying randomly. And that suggests directional selection. So it kind of demonstrates that we have a series of clades where you have selection towards reduction of forelimbs, which is a nice result because we knew it anyway, but here they've shown it quantitatively. And they've also done some ancestral state reconstructions, which actually they say shows that forelimbs were reduced based on their definition of reduced forelimbs in 5 separate lineages of theropods.
So I thought that was quite interesting. So just to interject there, that is, I guess, underscores the point you and I were making at the beginning, right? That a lot of this has been done on anecdotes and sort of
exactly,
okay, this one's got robust and this one's, just so stories about how the T-Rex arms got short. And this study sort of does it in a big, quantitative way across lots of different clades. And when you do that, they actually found out that this happened not 3 times as everyone thought, but actually 5 times based on what they got the definition. So I think that's kind of interesting.
It is interesting, absolutely interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
So taking a step back from all the depth that we went into with the statistics, we've got to this point where this has happened 5 times in the theropods, that they've reduced their forelimbs. And on each occasion, it appears to be correlated with an increasingly robust skull. So I guess that's a nice, interesting conclusion, right?
Indeed, and that is the conclusion of the paper. But then they go on to do, I think, to speculate about why this might be the case. And I quite like this because I think they're actually setting up some other hypotheses that potentially could be tested in the future as well here. So they talk.
I think the fossil files needs a little like a theme tune or a soundbite for like speculation station. We slam a button and a noise plays. It's time to go into speculation station. Let's go.
Speculation station.
Speculation station. So, why do we have this relationship between cranial robusticity and fall in reduction? And thus, cranial robusticity presumably drove fall in reduction. So they're suggesting that one drove the other. They do say it could be the other way around, but it's more likely, they think, that cranial, as the cranium got more robust, it drove fall in reduction. And the reason for this is it's related to diet. Of course, skull robusticity, we think about animals like crocs and other things where, you kind of all the holes close up because of the way they're feeding. So, of course, the cranium is fundamentally shaped by the forces that affect it during feeding. And this, I think, is particularly true of carnivores. I've tried to do a study on this once, but it keeps getting rejected. I submitted it to NERC, but anyway. In carnivores, you've got kind of prey that's struggling potentially. And so the feeding forces are potentially quite important in terms of the shape of the skull. So they suggest that larger, heavier prey is going to need a more robust skull to subdue and to manage. And we know that during the Mesozoic, and particularly as you get on through the Mesozoic into the late Jurassic and into the Cretaceous, when we start to see this reductions really occurring noticeably, we've got very big prey. So we've got the largest terrestrial organisms ever to walk the earth, of course, with the sauropods. But even the things like the hadrosaurs, stegosaurs, the iguanodontians, they were massive. They were huge. And so, these theropods are having to eat these things. They're probably eating the juveniles, but the juveniles are still big and they've got to grow really quickly. So there's a lot of large-bodied herbivores, a lot of large-bodied prey. Theropods needed to get bigger bodies, and in order to, and those ones that hunted large-bodied prey would have needed to get more robust skulls to hold them down. And because they were doing that, they were de-emphasizing their forelimbs. They were no longer grabbing the prey and pulling it to their mouth. They're just chomping down on it to subdue it. And that is where this cranial robusticity thing comes in. Nice. So that is their speculation station around the causes of this increase in cranial robusticity. I think it's fair. I think it's an interesting hypothesis, and people could then go out and test it. People can then go out and look at, and come up with ways in which, potentially you could have a look at feeding and evidence that these particular taxa were taking down large-bodied prey. And I think, it's completely plausible, isn't it? It's completely
reasonable. That's nice. I think that's a nice way to sum up the point, right? Is that they've gone what they've ended up with is this, which is now, I would testable hypothesis that it is related to prey size. They compared it to rodents, which I thought was interesting, because there's data from rodents which says that they can. Also wasn't unaware of this. As they get bigger prey, sometimes they get more robust skull. But this does lead us to sort of wander into an ongoing theropod debate. I mean, you could have theropod controversies. We could have a whole thing just about that. But one is about whether T-Rex was hunting or scavenging is something that people have spilt a lot of academic blood over. And if you're hunting, you need the big robust skull. If you're scavenging, do you or not? I don't know. I guess you probably do. If you're eating big prey, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Probably not. I mean, you probably don't. But also, this is a completely false argument, isn't it? Because if you look at predators today,
they do both.
Yeah, they do both. I mean, you're not just going to walk past a lovely fresh carcass on the floodplain, are you? As a theropod, you're not going to go, oh no, I don't fancy that one. I'm going to go and kill my own. It just wouldn't have happened. So it's a completely false argument. Of course they do both, but yeah, I think it's a good point. That I guess the argument is if T-Rex was only scavenging, why did it need such a big chunky skull? It's true. I do have some other slight things that have just occurred to me really as we've been talking through, and I think one of them is ontogeny with this as well, particularly with regard to cranial robusticity. So some of the metrics that they were using to come up with this cranial robusticity score, one of them includes skull fusion. And I'm quite interested in how you take ontogeny into account there, because fusion, at least in herbivorous dinosaurs, increases all bits of the body, including the skull, increases as things get older. So it would be interesting to know a little bit about ontogeny there, and it might well be that they discuss this in the supplementary data, and I haven't read it. But that might be having some influence on robusticity if we have adults of some taxa and not of others. But in general, I think, yeah, nice study, like it, interesting, comes up with testable hypotheses.
Yeah.
Good work all round.
So here's my opportunity to go on a little tangent here, because this boils down to some now interesting questions about the nature of adaptation, function, and all sorts of interrelated anatomical bits and pieces that might have led to this pattern. Have we talked about the spandrels of St. Marco on the fossil files before? I don't think we have we?
No.
Okay, so have you ever been to the lovely Italian canal city of Venice?
I have not.
Oh, you've not? Oh, well, I thought you need to check it out. So on the main square where
I have
everyone
been
has
to. I've been to the Venice Las Vegas, but I don't believe it's quite the same.
That might, I don't know how faithfully they've reproduced the Basilica of San Marco. So on that main, that expensive square in Venice where they've got where people get gouged for having like a €12 coffee served to you by the man of the suit. Well, overlooking it is the beautiful Basilica of San Marco, a lovely church. So in that church, it's got this really impressive dome up in the roof of the dome, and it's covered in gold, and it's got all these beautiful ornate pictures of various religious saints doing this with their fingers, and it's lovely, a lovely building. Now, in the 1970s, a famous paper was written by Gould and Lewontin, I think it was, about the spandrels of San Marco and the Panglossian paradigm. So this paper, I think, I mention it quite a lot in my undergraduate teaching because it's really come to inform a lot of these sorts of ways of interpreting these sorts of stories. About how do you interpret the biological function of a piece of anatomy, which is really what this is about, right? What has happened that has led to this fall in reduction, which is the question that everyone gets obsessed with. So in this paper, they raised the spandrels of San Marco. So if you look at the dome, it's got this enormous dome up inside the church, and it's got these lovely gold sort of frescoes in it, and if you looked up at the dome you might think, well, that dome was constructed in such a way as to host these beautiful pictures. But actually what's happened is, because it's a dome on top of arches, so they've got 4 arches on the walls, and then they've got a dome on top of that, and if you think about a dome on top of arches would naturally lead to these massive gaps. Just because the way you construct the building, you end up with these enormous gaps that aren't supporting the weight of the building, they're not architecturally part of it, they're just a gap, and those gaps are what host those beautiful paintings. So those beautiful paintings are just to fill in a gap. They are an architectural byproduct of the way that the building was constructed. And Gould and Lewontin in this paper imply that happens all the time in biology. That if you look at the way a body is constructed, you might look at some piece of anatomy like a zebra stripe or a giraffe's neck or a T-Rex's small forelimbs, and you might say, well, let's try and tell a story about how that function ended up to be what it is. But actually what it might be is just the byproduct of what's going on in the way that the body is constructed and the way that it grows. And I think the forelimb is a really interesting one, because maybe if you've got a really robust skull and you're a near bipedal organism, then maybe just as a consequence of having a robust skull, then your limbs get shorter, and they have to, just as a consequence of the way that development happens and the way that bodies develop and grow. There's so many interrelated things going on. If you poke a bit of a fetus as it's growing and change one part of it, another part of it might end up overcompensating. So I think it's important to bear that in mind when we come on to thinking about T-Rex arms, that actually it could be related to some other things that we can't see or know, or some other function that we can't quantify, just as a consequence of the way that bodies grow and develop.
Very nice, Rob. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And that has always occurred to me when, when people were always trying to come up with a functional reason for the smallness of the arms. It could be that there isn't a functional reason, right? That there's no, they are small because, they just are. They're just not needed anymore. Either they're not needed, or because something else is going on in the body. Yeah. That means that, developmentally, the development of long arms gets switched off or whatever. I mean, it's not an on-off thing, is it? Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess the question is,
very nice.
One of the questions that's been raised in this context before is, why are they still there? If you don't need them, are they just used? I guess people might be disappointed if we don't highlight some of the hypotheses, which is the one you raised at the beginning, is the one that people talk about a lot, is the holding on. If you're mounting, do you need to hold on? I don't know that those arms would help a lot with that.
No, I don't know. We don't really know a lot about how T-Rex mated, so it's a bit difficult to speculate around that, isn't it? I mean, yeah. I don't know. And it could be that if they hadn't have been wiped out 66 million years ago, we would now have a bunch of theropods with no arms. I mean, elephant birds don't have any forelimbs, do they? They don't have any wings. So they lost. They went so far as to completely lose as far as we know. They didn't have any. There's no evidence that they had any forelimbs. So there are things that have literally just completely lost them.
Yeah.
It looks like you're just checking your emails or something. Rob's just having, he's just checking his emails.
No, I'm looking at pictures of elephant bird skeletons. I wanted to see just how gone their limbs are, and you're right.
No, there's nothing.
Gone.
So I think there was some. I don't know anything about it. I'm just going to caveat this by saying I don't know anything about elephant birds. I've just seen there's one downstairs, and it, I think there's some discussion about whether they were gone or they just never found them. But there's so many of them, but they've just never found any evidence of forelimbs. So they just think they just weren't there at all.
So I'm not checking my emails. I'm listening very intently, and you've sparked my curiosity, Susie. Come on now. Okay, so what do you think our take-home messages are then?
So take-home messages. I think that was a great. Actually, what you just said, Rob. I think what was it? The who is
the Spandrels of St. Marco.
The Spandrels of St. Marco. Yeah, I think that was great. What I think I really like about this paper is I really like the testing of hypotheses, particularly, or the test instead of rampant speculation, applying some numbers to this.
Yes,
I think that's really nice. Please, theropod people. I think that was really nice. I still have concerns about compounding error. I am concerned about things like body mass, errors around body mass, autocorrelations, and ontogeny. And that I am concerned that sometimes we can, in paleontology, we've gone a little bit too far the other way, where we risk, by which I mean everybody used to, paleo was basically a social science, wasn't it? We just sort of made up just so stories about things. And so everybody went, no, we're actual scientists, and applied loads and loads and loads and loads of stats to try to prove it. And I think sometimes that can go a bit far, and that then we get levels of precision that are beyond what we maybe can support, what the fossil record can support. But in general, I'd rather see somebody applying some data to something than just a load of rampant speculation.
Sure, I agree with that. But going back to your first point, next time we're at a conference and we're sat in the audience and some theropod worker starts describing things as robust, I will give you £5 if you just shout out immediately, "How robust?"
Where is it on the Charlie Roger Scherer index?
Yeah. Show me some numbers here. Come on. I'm not accepting this anymore.
So how much will you give me for saying that?
I said £5, but I realised that's too rich. I'm going to give you 1 pint of beer. Actually, that's more than £5.
That's about, around here, that's about £9, Rob. A South Kensington pint or a Manchester pint?
Well, I'll tell you, Manchester pints is not far off South Kensington pints nowadays. But now I'm sounding like an old fart. Oh, I remember the days when I could cycle down to the shop and get 20p sweets or whatever. Go and get my £1 pint. Anyway, off the point. The point is, I think we can do better than just describing things as robust or unique or strong or whatever, and as these guys have evidenced.
Yeah.
Thanks, Susie, for talking to me about theropods, and I actually found that really interesting, and hopefully I'll bring you something equally as interesting next time.
Cool. Looking forward to it, Rob. See you later.
The Fossil Files was created by Robert Sansom and Susanna Maidman.
Fossil Files is a labour of love created in our spare time with no budget, so we really welcome any support you can provide us via our Patreon.
There you can access bonus content and join in the discussion by posting your own questions or even participate in live episodes.
In either case, we want to hear what you think. You can let us know what you thought about the topics we discussed or make suggestions for future papers in our social media channels.
You can find links to our Blue Sky, Instagram and YouTube channels on our website fossils.libsyn.com.